Hi everybody, today we are going to work on the September 2025 perfectly pieced 6-inch block tote bag project. I've got my perfectly pieced fabric already cut and organized. I'll show that to you. We're going to need our single block with quilting instructions, the 6-inch block tote project instructions, and the vine border instructions. I've already cut all my fabrics. This is what's left over. I did make a change to the lining fabric. I'll show you that shortly. So I have a lot of this fabric left. Since we're making a bag, I'd like it to be able to stand up. I'm going to use by Annie Soft and Stable instead of project batting. If you have Kimberbell Flexi Foam, that is also extremely similar to Soft and Stable. If you've never used Soft and Stable before, I'm going to show that to you. I've already cut from this bundle. This was an 18 by 58. It does come in different sizes and it comes in different colors, and it's folded in the package. But all you have to do to get these folds completely out is either steam iron it or spray it with water and iron it, and you'd never know there was a crease. The faux leather strapping and the color thread that we're going to use for the quilting is included in this month's kit. I have all my fabrics cut and labeled. I did make a couple changes. I'll go over those really quick. Piece 1 and piece 4 is directional, and in the instructions it says to cut them 3 1/4 by 4. I cut them both 4 by 4. That way when I'm at the machine and I'm laying down the fabric, I don't have to worry whether or not I cut it correctly to fit the space and keep the fabric direction going the correct orientation. They're right here on the bag. Here's the brown one here, and the floral here and here. So you can see for one block, they go one direction, and then in another block, they go the other direction. There's a note here to cut all the tote strips 1 to 2 inches longer if quilting them in the hoop. I did that. My tote strips are right here. These are the top and bottom strips. I even made a note so I wouldn't forget. I cut mine longer. I cut mine 2.5 by 14 instead of 2.5 by 12.5. I have my soft and stable cut instead of batting. You're going to have 4 blocks, so you need 4 pieces, 7-inch square. I've got my base piece cut according to the directions. For the top and bottom strips, I took a fabric strip and I laid it on the soft and stable. I had some scrap pieces. I just made sure that it's big enough for the fabric strip. This is going to be tacked down and trimmed, so you just need to make sure it's a little bit bigger than your fabric strip. For my lining, I chose canvas. I happen to have canvas on hand. This is a little more sturdy than that fabric, and I do like the print on that fabric. I'd like to use that for something else other than the inside of a tote bag. I also have sticky back Velcro and a piece of cardboard. You'll see what I'm going to use this for at the end of the video. I'm going to be working with a 9.5 by 14-inch hoop today. I already have my Kimberbell light mesh cutaway stabilizer loaded, and I have those faux leather straps off to the side. I've got some clappers. This is a clapper. I have them sitting on top of the strap to help flatten it out while we work on this project. I'm on a baby lock meridian. We need to make 4 of these 6-inch blocks. I can do 2 at a time in my hoop, and there's 2 ways to make 2 blocks. Here's my blocks right here, my perfectly pieced folder. I'm going to bring up 1 block. I'm going to hit set. I'm going to go ahead and just move this up and out of the way. My machine has 2 ways to duplicate, and I have the instructions in front of me, so I call these the right thing. This square with a dotted square is called the duplicate key, and then underneath all these little squares are called the border key. Both of these buttons will duplicate what's on your screen, but depending which one you use affects the order of your stitch out. I'll go ahead and show that to you in case you've never seen that. Using the duplicate key, I now have 2 blocks. Let's hit the embroidery button. I want to get it to where it stitches out. Do you see here how the colors change? It's doing 1 step at a time on 1 block. So we have a batting placement, a batting tack down, and then I think this is the piecing template, and then we start doing fabric placement, tack down, because we have all these little pieces to make the flying geese. When you add them using that button, it's going to do 1 at a time. So it will completely step through 1 block, and then it will go to the next block. Let me show you what happens when you use the border key to duplicate. And that's my favorite way to duplicate things. I think that's the easiest way to make more than one thing in the hoop at the same time, especially if it's the exact same block. I'm going to move that out of the way, hit edit, hit the one with all the little squares. That's the border key. Up and down is highlighted, which is correct, that's what we want. We're going to add one below, so this button right here with the plus at the bottom. And it looks like there might be a little more space. There's space in between, but I can see if I can get a little bit of extra space. There's a button here with 2 arrows pushing out and a button with arrows pushing in. Let's hit the one with the arrows pushing out. I had a little bit more space, so I'll go ahead and take that. Now the blocks are as far apart as they can be for my largest hoop. I'm going to hit OK and embroidery. See how it does everything twice? So now I have batting placement line, tack down line, tack down line. So it's going to do the same step twice. This to me is more efficient, especially when we're going to be placing and cutting so many pieces of fabric. We have to make 4 blocks, so I'll go ahead and film walking through. You're going to get 2 blocks because I'm going to make 2 at a time, and then I'll do the other 2 off camera. Before I start, I'm going to save this to my machine in case I bump my machine, have to get up and walk away, get interrupted, you never know. It's always good to have it backed up on your machine just in case. We're ready to get started. I have a neutral thread on my machine. I'm going to go ahead and put my embroidery hoop on and we'll start the stitch out. Again, neutral thread on my machine. The first thing that's going to happen is it's going to stitch a batting placement line and my machine's going to stitch out 2 of those. Once your placement lines have stitched out, go ahead and place your soft and stable, flexi foam, project batting, whatever you're working with. I'm going to tape it and I'm going to keep a close eye on it because this is kind of big and squishy. It's like a couple layers of batting. This one's going to be easier to tape at the bottom. So I'm going to add my tape down there. I've got my hand underneath and then I'm just pressing on top like this. We're going to stitch our tack down line and I'm going to sit here and watch it and make sure nothing shifts or moves. Once these are tacked down, you need to trim off all the extra that's on the outside. Everything's trimmed. Let's stitch our piecing template. We have both of our piecing templates stitched out. There's a couple things we're going to stop and go over really quickly. You can leave your neutral thread on your machine. I'm going to go ahead and put this thread on the machine, the one that came with the kit. It's called Cork. Something of note, when you have your instructions in front of you, this is the single block with quilting. You see how this has blue, brown, and gray. When you look at the tote project, we have brown, floral, and gray. The fabrics are different. So if you're referring to your single block with quilting instructions as you're going through, like right now we're going to start with our piece 1 fabric. See how it shows the blue? The piece 1 fabric for the tote is not the blue. Piece 1 is this fabric right here. Piece 1 for the tote is brown. Now I already have all my fabrics cut and labeled, but you can refer to this picture as you're working through the instructions if you're cutting this according to this layout. Just remember to keep your fabric straight. Don't get confused because the block coloring on the single block with quilting instructions for this is different than the tote instructions here. Just keep your fabric straight. Take your time. I'm going to switch my thread and we'll start with piece 1 and I am working according to this layout. We're going to start with our piece 1 fabric, which is right here at the bottom. That's this fabric if you've cut it according to the tote instructions. It's directional. And remember when we make the tote, one's going to go this way and then one block will flip and go this way. So if you want to keep everything going up on the front of your tote, you would place one just like that, so it is going up. We're going to trim these. The amount of fabric you're going to see is going to be so small, I'm not really sure that it matters that it's directional now that I'm looking at it. So this one I'm placing going up, and then this one I'm going to rotate, and I'll do that when I make my other 2 blocks as well, and I'll place this with the fabrics going down. It's going to stitch out a line right there, and that's going to be our trimming and placement line. Let's have a look at my top piece. See that? I have to pick this out and redo that one. I'll do that off camera. Fix this one. We need to trim this piece of fabric off. Once those are trimmed, you're going to take fabric 2. That's the blue linen looking fabric, you want to line it up along that stitch line, right sides together. So the blue fabric is right side down. I'm going to line this one up here. You can tape it if you want. I don't think it's going to move. Make sure it's centered along that line. I'm going to slide this back on my machine and I'm going to stitch the seam. You have the option here of taking this over to your ironing board and pressing this. I don't do that. I'm going to put my hand underneath. I'm going to hit it with my little roller, and then I will actually add a small piece of tape off here to the side to hold it nice and flat. But you can certainly take your hoop off your machine, go over to your ironing board and press the seam. I'm not going to do that. It's going to take too long. We're going to be doing this the same process over and over and over again. And I usually get pretty good results with my little seam roller. So that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and tape that one as well just to hold it down. And then we're going to stitch another trimming and placement line. It's going to go right here. This time we need to trim on this side. So you need to trim both of these. Once you've got these trimmed, you want to grab piece 3. It's another piece of that background blue. Center it along that line, and we're going to stitch another seam. This process will happen over and over again. That's how you make the flying geese in the hoop. Whoops, be careful you don't do that. I've got 2 layers stuck together. We don't want to do that. I have done that before, and then you get to the end and say, why am I missing a piece of fabric? And you have to figure out where it went. Center it along that line, and then stitch your seam. Same thing we did before. Roll it or press it, whatever you'd like to do. You'll even see in the instructions that they stop spelling it out. They just say stitch, trim, place, stitch, flip. And then as you progress through the instructions, it says the same thing over and over and over and over again. That's what we're going to do to build out this part of the flying geese. I saw that one coming, but my hand wasn't fast enough. Make sure that's nice and flat. I'm going to grab a piece of tape, tape that, and then I'm going to go down to this bottom one because I don't want to pick out stitches again, and tape that, and I'll back up my machine. Just a few stitches to account for that. In case you've never had to back up your machine, this button right here, needle minus plus. Let's go back 10. Nope, I need to do more. It's moving the hoop. There we go. Let me show that to you. So it's going to start right here. Here's where it got caught. I want to make sure I sit here and I stare at it. What we need to do now is trim this piece. And sometimes I've found, yep, you end up with a little point up here. I'll show that to you. I'm going to trim these flags and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. See this right here? This is hard to get rid of. That's the one problem I have with doing this kind of project in the hoop. And the next fabric that's here is the white fabric. So I have to get rid of that, otherwise it's going to show through. So I'm just kind of pull. It just depends how fussy you want to get them. I'll use my seam ripper and I'll get rid of the thread there. And there's going to be another thread there and clean this up. I've got them both nice and clean, and again, you don't have to do that if that doesn't bother you. I'm going to put this back on my machine. We'll get our next piece of fabric. We're going to place our piece 4 fabric next, and you want to place this right side down. We want to center it along that seam, and I'm looking at this. I need to do this one like that. Remember, I have these facing this way. Although for this fabric, looking at the print, it's probably not even going to matter. Center that along that seam right there. And then for the one here, I want it facing this way, facing up, my directional fabric. Center it along that seam line, just like that. And then it's going to stitch across. With these, there's no trimming. We're going to flip them up. Now, one thing that's nice is you do have a little overlap here. Mine ended right here, before I trimmed off, remember we had that little point, it ended right there, so it a little bit would have been visible, so I am glad I trimmed that. I'm going to flip this up, and it's upside down, matching this being upside down, so that's good. I'm going to flip this one up, right side up, right side up. I need to find my little roller. I'm going to remove my tape. We're going to do some trimming. Just like before, I'm going to go ahead and trim. Grab some of these. They're calling this piece 5. Right sides together, so make sure you're laying this with the dark side down. Center it along that stitch line. Right there. And then this one, same thing, centered along this stitch line. Right there. You can tape that if you like. That seam has stitched. Trim the extra. I'm going to get another piece of blue. Remember, right sides together. So place that right side down, wrong side up. Centered along that line. Same thing down here. Flip and press just like before. Once those 2 lines have stitched, if you use tape, the tape has to come off. We have to trim. We've got a weird little peak again. I need to pick that off. I'm going to do that off camera. I showed you how I did that. So clean this up and get ready for the next piece of fabric. We want our piece 7 fabric, which is this one with the, I don't know, leaves, acorns, mushrooms, whatever. It doesn't look directional to me, so that's a plus. Right side down, center it along that stitch line, and then we'll stitch the seam. Flip them, press them, tape them, whatever you want to do. If you use tape, take off the tape, trim this piece off, and then we're going to place another piece of our blue background fabric. More of the blue, right side down. They're calling this piece number 8. Once that's stitched, go ahead and flip it, press it, tape it, just like before. Trim this piece of fabric. Once you've got it trimmed, grab a couple more of these. This is piece number 9. Right side down, centered along that stitch line. The next line is going to go from the top to the bottom. If you're doing 2 in 1 hoop, there's a line right here. I'm going to bring this up and just trim this just outside of that line. It's going to come off again. It's going to come off at the end anyway. So I'm going to get it out of the way. And then, I was going to say I'm also going to trim this. Look, it already got caught. It's not going to matter. But I will go ahead. Get that out of the way. Just in case. So a little bit of it got caught underneath. But thankfully, this is dark blue. You're never going to see it. And I cut my piece bigger. Remember at the beginning I was worried about it being directional, and honestly you don't have to do that, it doesn't matter. So if you cut your piece the right size, that's not going to happen if you're doing 2 of these in the hoop at the same time. They'll fit just fine. I'm going to go ahead and re-tape this, and then we're going to stitch that trimming and placement line. If you've taped it, go ahead and remove your tape. What you need to trim is all of this, and this, and this, because we're going to be placing the yellow. And again, there's going to be a couple of things that stick up. I'll show that to you. I trimmed along that line, but right here I have a stitch line here, here, and then the same thing on this block down here, here, and here. So in order to get rid of this blue, which I need to get rid of because this piece is yellow and you'll see the blue through the yellow, if you have a different machine, let me know if that happens on your machine and what you like to do to deal with it. I'm going to do this off camera because I'm going to have to get my seam ripper and pull a few stitches in each of those spots and then trim those little bits off before I can place my yellow fabric. I've got these trimmed and cleaned up, and I went and had lunch. We are going to place this right side down on the seam line here. Place that like that. Right side down, and also this one. I also lint rolled it. I'm going to place that centered along that seam line. Let's go ahead and put it back on the machine, and it's going to stitch the seam. Once the seam has stitched, I'm going to do the same thing we did before. Next we're going to get a trimming and placement line right up here. Go ahead and take your tape off if you use tape and you want to go ahead and trim off this piece. Piece 11, it's your blue again, just on a bigger scale. I'm sure you saw me pull that out of the way. I noticed as it was coming this direction, I thought it was going to hit this. It actually wouldn't have. It's very close. But now we're going to trim this and trim this. And then we're going to add that last piece of background fabric. I don't want this to get caught underneath when I place that next piece of blue. So I'm going to cut this off just like I did here. Make sure I leave enough that it's covering this outside line, but I want to get that out of the way. And you want to trim this yellow out of the way. I've trimmed my extra yellow and I trimmed that little bit off the top of this so it doesn't get caught. We've got piece number 12. This is the last piece, and then we'll do our quilting. So go ahead and line it up just like the other pieces. Center it along that line, and then we'll stitch the seam. We're going to flip these over and press. A couple of things. First thing, do you see this? This is overlapping here. So I do need to trim that because I don't want this to get caught on this block when we do quilting. So I will go ahead and trim that off, and then after I do that, I'm going to take this off my machine and give it a really good press with my iron. That way it's nice and flat. It's definitely worth it to take this off your machine and give it a good press. The next thing we're going to stitch is the trimming line. It's a box that goes around each block. We're on our last step, which is the quilting. If you haven't already put on the color that came in the box, I believe it was called cork, put that on, or if you want to use a different color, whatever color you'd like to use. My first 2 blocks are done. Remember, you need 4 to make this. Unless you decide you want to make half a tote or a small little square tote, you can have 1 block on the front and 1 block on the back and adjust everything. The next thing we're going to work on are our top and bottom strips. You're going to have 4 of these because there's a top and bottom on each side. We'll be using the Vine border files that came with this month's Perfectly Pieced. I did cut my strips longer and I thought I'd be able to fit 4. So I went to my embroidery machine and I tried to load 4 files because visually 4 fit. It's a tight squeeze, but you can't fit 4 of these files across. I can do 3. What I'm going to do is 2 at a time. And instead of putting them in the middle, I'm going to slide them over to the side like that, and I'll do 2. And then I have all this extra stabilizer over here because this is the 20-inch wide. I'll shift everything and then I'll do the next 2, but I'll just do these 2 on camera. If you've never worked with border files, I'll link a few of my other videos below that walk you through step by step in case you don't have a long enough hoop and you have to do multiple hoopings. I'm going to use the 2 by 14-inch file. Our strips are 2.5 inches, so we're going to be using a 2-inch wide border strip file. As I'm feeling this fabric, it seems a little bit on the thin side, and when I look at the border, there's a lot of heavy stitching here. I'm going to go ahead and add fusible to the back of these before I quilt my border strips, just to make them a little bit more stable. I'll use my Kimberbell fusible backing to back the border strips. Let's load our border file, and just for fun I'll show you that I can only fit 3. And I'll be using the 2 by 14. So here's the first one, and we'll use the border button to duplicate. We want one over here on the side, so not up and down, right to left. See, I can only put 3. So for me, I don't want to have them that close together. I don't want to do 3 then 1. I'm going to do 2 and slide it and do 2. Take 1 away, put a little space between them, and I'm going to slide them over to the side. I'm ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and save that to my machine just in case. Let's get started. I decided to leave on the cork colored thread for this. The first thing it's going to stitch out is the batting placement line. And just a quick reminder, I'm using soft and stable for these strips as well as for the quilt blocks. I'm not using any batting at all, but you could certainly use regular batting. Next, you're going to want to place your batting or your soft and stable, whatever you're using. Make sure you cover the placement line. Once everything is tacked down, trim everything that's outside the tack down lines, just like you were doing a quilt block. Got these trimmed. Don't worry about making these neat. We're going to be trimming these and attaching, so if it's a little fuzzy like that, don't worry about it. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the fabric placement lines. Next, we need to place our fabric and cover the placement lines. Wow, they're really tight this time, and that happens sometimes with these border files, and I always think I should just cut my strips wider than they say. It'll work out. Don't worry about it. Get it centered, because remember, your strip is 2.5 inches wide and the border is only 2 inches. So get it as close to centered as you can. And it looks like the tack down line is probably going to be just inside that placement line. So it is a tight squeeze. If you're watching this before you do your project, you could always cut these at 3 inches wide. It'll make this step just a little bit easier. You will use more fabric though. I'm going to go ahead and tape that and tape the other one. My strips are cut longer. Again, they're cut at 14, and when we're putting this bag together, we're going to trim. So if you stitch over the tape at the top and the bottom, it's not going to matter. I'm going to sit here and keep an eye on this and make sure that these don't shift, and we're going to stitch the tack down lines. See how it caught here, but it didn't catch here? This is really tight. I'm going to go ahead and back this up a little bit, pick this out, and lay it flat. I went ahead and backed this up. I taped the corner down, and I looked along the length of the strip. It's going to be tight, but hopefully I'll catch it and it won't be a problem. Let's stitch out our quilting. I'm going to slide this over in the hoop. Let's see if I can fit this without needing to make too many adjustments. I have just enough space so this can land right here. I don't have to sew on an extra strip, so when I load the files for my next two, I'll slide them over this way. Borders are done and our blocks are done. We need to get everything trimmed. The first thing I'm going to do is trim off all the excess stabilizer. This I'll be able to use again somewhere else, and get these blocks all separated. For our tote, we're working with a 6-inch finished block. If you look at your single block with quilting instructions, here's your 6-inch block. This is the trim size. See how it says trim size? 6.5 inches squared, and then when you sew it into your projects, it's 6 inches. These need to be cut to 6.5 inches squared. Here's a couple easy options. If you have the 6.5 inch orange pop ruler, you can use that. I have a 6.5 inch square ruler. I can use that. If all you have is a straight ruler, if you cut on this outside line, just like that, you'll end up at 6.5 inches square. I'm going to use a straight ruler today. A lot of times I do use the orange pop rulers in my videos. I have several videos showing how to use that. I'll link that below. But let's use a straight ruler today and then measure it and see how it comes out. I'm going to cut right along that line, the outside line. There's an inside line and an outside line for parts of the quilting. Make sure you're on the outside line. I have everything trimmed. I went ahead and laid these out on a board because I did make sure these fabrics were going up, and that when I flipped the other two, the fabric would still be going up in that direction. I wanted to make sure I've got the orientation correct on these. I'm going to set these aside, and we're going to talk about trimming the borders. You can certainly cut right along that line. That'll be fine. Here's how I'm going to cut mine. I'm going to see if I can manage to get them attached without stitching into the quilting. So what I'm going to do, this ruler has a nice 1/4 inch line here. I know I'm going to put this together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is my 1/4 inch line. I'm going to line that up on the points of the leaves in the quilting. And again, you certainly do not have to do this. And when I do that, this looks like it may work really well. It's pretty much right at the edge of the fabric. Let's go ahead and cut this one like this. And I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, you can see I did not cut on the stitching. The stitching is still there. I'm a little bit outside that stitching line. My guess is it's 1/8 of an inch. There's something weird about these border quilting files where I'm always measuring 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to put my 1/4 inch again, lining up on the edge of those leaves because I don't want to catch the points when I put them together. I'm not really trimming any of the fabric off as I do this. Little itty bitty bit of the fabric got trimmed off, just a tiny bit, but I still did not trim on that line. So in theory, my quilting is centered with a 1/4 of an inch over on either side. I'm completely ignoring these trim lines. If I cut on the trim line, say I cut right on that stitch line, and then I use a 1/4 inch seam allowance to sew these together, I'm going to sew the points off of these. That's why I trimmed it like that. I'm going to go ahead and trim all my strips like that. I have these trimmed, and you'll notice all I trimmed were the sides. Mine are longer. Mine are about 14 inches. I'm not going to trim the tops and the bottoms until we go to attach it. The first thing we're going to do is work with our quilt blocks. I'm going to sew these two together and these two together. I'm over at my Juki Teal 2020 PE straight stitch only machine. I want to change this foot. This is a regular 1/4 inch foot with no guide. I'll show these. I've shown them before, but just in case you've never seen them, I have 2 1/4 inch feet that came with this machine, and they both have a guide. This is called a compensating foot. See how thick that is? And then this is the regular 1/4 inch with guide. I want to use the compensating foot because it's got this nice thick guide, and it's heavier, and what it does is it gives you more space to move thicker fabrics through. We're using quilted blocks. This is going to be my choice. I've got that foot on my machine. I'm at a stitch length of 2. I'm going to put my first 2 blocks right sides together. One thing you want to look at is make sure your points on your flying geese are matching. I'm going to sew this seam. We'll see how I did with my pins. Pretty good. Here's my blocks sewn together. This one matched really well. I don't feel like I need to tighten that at all. This one I actually already sewed a couple of times and seam ripped. For some reason I just can't get that to line up. It's very, very, very minor. Do you see that? One is slightly higher than the other. It's fine, it's a bag. Nobody's going to notice. Everything's sewn, everything's pressed. Just going to sew them on like that. Right sides together. 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then press. I'll go ahead and do that off camera. I have my first strip sewn on. Remember how I measured 1/4 inch? Let's look. I'm nervous. Oh, it looks great. Let me come in closer. Really close right there on that one in particular. But as you go down, I didn't catch any of the quilted points in the seam. That looks good. The little edges that are too long will get trimmed off. I'm going to go ahead and finish this one and the other one. Looks like I'm going to be pressing in. It sort of naturally folds that way. I've got everything pressed. I need to trim the extra. My front and back panels are ready. I'm going to set these aside and we're going to have a look at the instructions. When I went through the instructions, I cut my top and bottom strips and I cut the tote base. So my tote base is still sitting here. I haven't quilted it. I guess they're classifying it as a strip because the next thing we want to do is work with the tote base. We've put our blocks together, we've sewn the strips on, and now we're going to put the base on. Mine's not quilted. This is the outside bottom of the bag. I did not cut this piece longer. Remember how at the beginning of the instructions it tells you to cut the strips longer if you're going to quilt them? I didn't do that, so this is cut to length. What I'm going to do is go ahead and tack it down, and on my regular sewing machine I'm going to run some straight line stitching through it. This is the bottom of the bag. It's going to be like that. You're going to be setting it down on things nobody's ever going to see it. Otherwise, you need to quilt it like you do with your other strips. Here's what that looks like. You can see it is not perfectly centered, and I am okay with that. We want this strip to be 2.5 inches wide. I'm just going to cut right along the edge of the fabric. It did come in slightly because as you're quilting, when you make these stitches, it pulls in a bit. So we're going to clean this up. Base measures 2.5 by 10.5 before you do anything with it. So let's clean that up. And now back to our regularly scheduled program, as they used to say. Grab one of your pieces here. We're going to be attaching our tote base to the panel. What I'm going to do with my tote base is fold it in half. Yeah, I can see the fold. That works. We're going to put these right sides together, whichever side you want to be on the bottom. So if there's something wonky somewhere and you want that at the bottom, put this at the bottom. I'm looking at the center line right here. In fact, you can make a little mark. I've got a little indent. Got my fold and my little indent. I'm going to put that right there. That way it's centered. I've got a big clip handy. Usually I have my little clips over here. I don't today. I'll just use this big giant one. Now I know it's centered. Grab a ruler, a pen, a water-soluble pen or something. They want us to stop 1/4 inch from the edge. That's because we're going to be doing lining and we're going to be boxing the corners. We need to be 1/4 inch from the end. That's where they want us to stop. So I'm going to measure and I'll make a mark. And this is the Kimberbell water soluble. Wow, okay. So it kind of spreads a little bit on the soft and stable. I'm going to grab a pencil. It doesn't matter. You're going to have lining over this. You're not going to see it. Pencil's better. You can even use pen, whatever you have handy. And mark 1/4 inch. You can also stick a pin in it. If you don't want to mark anything, just use a pin. I could see that just fine. I'm going to take this over to my machine and sew from the 1/4 inch mark here to the 1/4 inch mark here. I added my straight stitch. What I did when I started was I went really slow and I did about 3 stitches forward, 3 stitches back, then I went along to the end, backed it up for 3 and went forward to 3 because they're having us leave this 1/4 inch not stitched. We can't run off and on to secure it. I'm going to take this over to my ironing board and press. It wants to go that way. That's the way I'm going to press it. This will be a little easier to line up because you can line up the sides. Let me turn that. Like this. See how I can line up the side here and the side here? And then just pull it down. Clip. I'm going to mark my 1/4 inch. Here's what it looks like from the front. Here's the inside. So make sure you've got everything on the right way, and that you're seeing your pretty fabric here, not the soft and stable or your batting, because this is the bottom of your bag. The next thing we're going to do is sew the sides. You want to match your sides, right sides together. So match up here. Big clip. I need to go get my little clips, but these are okay. You can pin, and as you're going down, you want to look and make sure everything's matching. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in that. I'm going to set this down for a minute. And the same here. Make sure this matches. And then to the bottom. You'll sew your seam. I'm going to do the 1/4 inch seam allowance with my guide. I'm going to go back and forth on each end to secure it. If you want to check at this point, you can flip this right side out and have a look. Actually, it's pretty good. I'll just check the top. I don't want to turn the whole thing right side out. Oh, I did really well. Okay. Something else I did each seam twice because this is a bag. Normally, I would run this through my serger, but my serger's in another room and it's kind of stuck behind the long arm. I'm not digging it out right now. So I just ran a straight line and then I did another one. I want to make sure this is nice and secure. The next thing we're going to do is work on the tote corners. We're going to box the corners. This is one of those things I think that it's easier to see than read. If you've never done this before and you're reading the instructions, it'll probably make no sense. Here's the top of my bag. Here's the bottom of my bag. We have an opening. I'm going to put my finger in here and pull the base up. See the hole? All you do, hold on here. Remember, you've got that 1/4 inch. Pull it. Just pull it and then try and match everything up. I'm going to fold this seam over to the side to get it out of the way. I'm going to use my big old fat clip. That's what it's going to look like. So the bottom is flat, and then this, you can see it kind of doesn't look like it matches up. You've got pointy corners and round corners. When you get over to your sewing machine, make sure the center at least matches, and you have to squish it under your presser foot. So I'll bring this over to the machine and we'll go ahead and work with it there. I'm using the foot with no guide. You just want a plain presser foot. This is actually a 1/4 inch foot if you sew along the outside. It just doesn't have that little guide that sticks down. I find this easier to do for something like this where I'm going to be jamming and squishing things. This is the bottom. See, that actually worked out really nice because it's easy to see what the bottom is because I messed up the sewing, isn't it? I'm going to tilt it up. Let me come out a little bit. You just have to sit here and monkey with it. In fact, I'll probably take my clip off. It's kind of in the way. I'm going to line that back up best that I can. And you just have to squish it. It's not going to look pretty for the moment. I'm going to do this with my fingers. Okay, you can add some pins. It might make it easier. But this part is going to look round. Don't worry about it. You're going to do the best that you can. It's the bottom of the bag. Just remember that. I'm going to sew it from this side. This is the base because I have a nice straight edge here, and then we'll flip it and we'll make sure we caught everything. Let's just go ahead and stitch this. Let's turn it on the other side. It looks like I caught everything. I'm actually going to put my hand inside the bag. I can feel that. And I can feel that. So I can't poke my fingers inside the bag. My finger's not poking through, so I did catch everything. I'm going to go right over that stitch line again. Flip it back. It's just really fussy. And let's stitch over it again. We want to hold this down. In fact, I'm going to go in about a thread's width and just get in a little tighter. Okay, again, it doesn't look pretty, but don't worry about it. I'm not even going to trim the corners because we're going to be putting in a lining. You can peek inside your bag, and I can tell that that's not straight, and that's why I never box corners this way. But let's see. It's not too bad, actually. Can you see that? It's relatively straight. It'll be fine. Okay, let's get in our bag. Let's have a look. That looks good. Pretty straight. Okay, let's go on to the next step. Grab your lining fabric. Remember, I'm using canvas. It's going to make the inside a little bit more durable. If you're using the pretty fabric, that is perfectly fine. If you're using the pretty fabric when you do this, short edges here, long edges here. So we're folding this way. Make sure you're folding right sides together. Since I'm using canvas, that doesn't matter. But if you're using the pretty fabric, make sure you've got your right sides together. I'm going to line up the top and just clip it just to be sure I've got everything even. You don't have to do that. We're going to be making some marks at the bottom of our fabric. You can iron the fold if you want. I'm just finger pressing it and then using my nail for the corner. I'm going to use a pencil for this. Doesn't matter. I'm going to start with this corner. We want to measure 1 inch up from the fold and then 1 1/4 inch over. So here's 1 inch up and 1 1/4 over. So double check. This is going to be 1 1/4 inches along your fold and then 1 inch up from the fold. And you want to mark that. So 1 1/4 and then 1. So there's your 1 1/4 and 1. I need to do the other corner. I'm going to turn it over. It's easier for me to work with the ruler that way and mark it just like I mark the other side rather than having to flip the ruler and figure it out. So 1 1/4 inch, 1 inch from the bottom to the top. Just like that. Get some sharp scissors. These are my Karen K. Buckley scissors. They're the sharpest scissors I own. We're going to cut these corners out very carefully. Okay. And once these corners are cut, we're going to sew our side seams. I'm going to put a pin right here since I just cut that and it's nice and even. I'm going to put one more here. And I've got my clip at the top. Let's do the other side. Now remember, I measured it the other way. Here's where I need to cut. I'm going to put a pin in the center. Here's what my lining looks like. Here's the top of the bag. The little corners we just cut out. We're going to sew 1/4 inch along the side seams. Again, if you're using the printed fabric, you should be looking at the wrong side of your fabric. If you happen to cut the corners the wrong way, it's okay. Just open it up and flip it. Make sure you've got the right sides together. You want to be looking at the wrong side of your fabric. I've stitched my seams on the side. I went ahead and did these twice as well. Now we're going to work with our boxed corners, just like before. This is going to be much easier because there's not a lot of bulk. You're going to pull it out, match your seam to your bottom fold. It's an easier way to do it. See how nice and flat that is? This is going to be much easier to sew than all that bulk. I can put pins in this and it'll stay nice and flat. So if you're watching this before you're making your tote and you've never boxed corners before, you can do these corners and then go back and do your bag after so you can practice on your lining fabric. See how nice and straight that is? Nice and straight, not a problem. I'll go to my machine and stitch 2 1/4 inch seams. I'll run over it once and again. Let's fold this one and pin this one together too. Open it up, line up your fold along your seam, and it doesn't matter which way the seam goes, it's lining. I'm just going to lie it flat. Pin, and then add 2 more pins. and pin. Nice and flat, nice and flat. So a 1/4 inch seam, do it twice. There's my 1/4 inch seam, and I went back and forth, stitched a seam, back and forth, and then I went and I did another seam. We're going to put the lining inside the bag. You want to turn this right side out. Okay, so flip your lining so you're looking at the right side of your lining. So it looks all nice and pretty. So if you're using the pretty fabric, now you see the print. For your bag, you're still looking at the wrong side. So your pretty fabric on your bag is in the inside. You're going to take your lining, right side out, pretty flowers, and you're going to put it inside the bag. So what you're going to end up with is right sides together, which is what we always have when we sew. So we want to put that inside our bag. I'm going to pull this away from the tripod because I have to get my hands inside, and you want to kind of line everything up and get it setting in there real nice. We're going to attach the lining to the bag. Here's what I like to do. I'm going to look inside my lining. This seam is going that way. I'm going to keep it going the same direction. That way it lies flat on the inside. This seam is going the other direction. So this one is going this way. That kind of works out nice. I can nest the seams. I'm going to pin this seam. I always start with the side seams when I'm making bags. I get a much better result. Let's flip to the next side. I'm going to look in my lining. This seam is going this way toward the top, and this is going toward the bottom. That worked out nice. Not intentional, just the way it happened. Line up those seams. Now I can see my lining isn't quite cut straight. I'll fix it later. I'm going to line that up, and I'll trim off this little bit later. I'm going to go ahead and pin that. So you have both your sides pinned. Now I will say the one drawback to using canvas is it really doesn't have any give. Your fabric is going to have give, so if your lining doesn't quite match, you'll be able to kind of wiggle it and work with it. I'm going to lay it down and kind of pull it, just sort of pull it. And then I like to pin the center. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Sort of pull it. I can tell my lining is a little bit bigger than my bag. That's okay. We'll have fun with that. I'll show you what I do with that, which is basically make it fit. Unless it's really bad, like if it's way off, if I've got way too much extra fabric, I'll pull it out and restitch the seam, but I don't. I can work with it. It's really easy to work with if you have regular fabric and not canvas. So you've got pins here, 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 and here. Just keep splitting the difference. I'm going to sort of pull that. It'll lie flat okay. Match that up. I'm going to put a pin in the center between those other two pins. Side seam, middle pin, pull. Oh, this will be fine. Pin. Go to your other side, so you've got side seam, center pin, side seam, pull it. I'm going to kind of hold it in the center, put in a pin. I'm going to pull. This is the part that needs to be trimmed, right? Yeah, that's the part that's a little big. That's okay. It kind of slopes down. I'll get it later. It might just get caught in the seam. I'm going to pin that. Now, don't go sewing all the way around it yet. We have to make a couple marks. It tells you to leave a 4-inch opening. Okay. Let's take my big giant hand. Let's see. A 4-inch opening is still going to be a little tight for me to kind of reach in and turn it. I'm going to give myself a little bit more space. I'll probably do about 5 inches, yeah, which happens to be the distance between these two pins. So what I'm going to do is put another pin right there, and another pin right there. Those are my start and stops. Let's go over to the sewing machine. Back at the machine, I've got my big guide foot on, the compensating foot. I've got my X here and my X here, my start and stop points. I'm going to start here. I'm going to go ahead and pull these pins out. And I'm going to go back and forth a few times. Just going to go all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam. The only thing I need to watch for is for that funny spot. It's on the other side. I'm going to take one of these clips where I have that high point in the fabric, so I need to watch for that. But again, even if I scooch it down and I line it up, which is probably what I'm going to do, it'll be fine because it's a bag lining. It'll work out just fine. Let's go ahead and stitch all the way around. I'm using a stitch length of 2, and I forgot to mention I'm using Aurifil 50 weight color 2000, so beige. Here we go. We're coming up on the seam. Do you see I've got a fold of fabric? I'm just going to move it into the seam. So I'm going to pull this pin out and pull the fabric tight. We'll stitch this bit straight. Now I'm getting to the seam. Here's the fabric fold. I'm going to have a fold inside the lining. It's not going to matter. I'm just going to fold it so it's close to this seam so it won't be really noticeable. Here's that little bit of fabric where it was over. I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. All trimmed. I do have some threads. Get them out of the way. You've got your opening. We're going to turn our bag right side out. Take your time, and I will do this off camera. It's really hard to do this and keep my hands centered on camera. Here's where I am right now. Before we put the lining in, check your corners. This corner's not the best, is it's sealed. I actually have a little bit where I missed. Do you see that when we box the corner? That's why I don't like boxing corners like this. I need to flip this back and catch this, because otherwise I've got a hole in the bottom of my bag. Let's check the other side. Not pretty but good, and not pretty but good. So I have to turn this part back out right there, and I need to catch this. So I did catch it, and now I have a funky bottom. Do you see that? Again, it's the bottom. Nobody's really going to notice it. I'm good with that. It's going to work as long as it's functional. So check your corners, double check, make sure everything's okay. I could have hand stitched this. If you watch my videos, you know how much I love hand stitching. Not going to happen. So I'd rather have a crooked corner than have to sit there and try and fuss with it and hand stitch. You want to push your lining into your bag. I'm going to talk a little bit about something that I like to call a design choice. As you're turning, you can see right now the lining is visible. So if you use that floral, let me turn to the other side, and you like that little peak of lining, leave it. We are going to top stitch it. You can leave it like this and top stitch it down, because you need to top stitch because you've got that opening here. You've got to get rid of this opening. It needs to be folded under and sealed. So if you like the look with that little peak of fabric, just make sure to fold it down and top stitch it. How it is in the pattern, it's completely folded in. Like this, and then you go to your iron and you press it down before you do your top stitching, and then you don't see the lining. So look at your bag Make sure the lining's all the way down. I've made a couple of tote bags like this where I actually like to see the lining. I kind of like it on this one, but because it's canvas, I'm going to go ahead and try and tuck it in. I'm going to go over to the ironing board and fold and press, and then fold and press, and I'm going to go all the way around. So I was trying to do this at the ironing board, and every time I would fold and press and then move, it just pops back out. So I'm going to use clips. I'm not going to worry about ironing it. I'm going to look at it, make sure I don't get that lining caught, and I'm going to clip it. And we'll go a little bit further down. I want to make sure I don't see my lining from the front. Again, unless you like it, there's going to be a lot of clips going around this. I'm going to go around my whole bag. Here's my clips all the way around, except for the opening. The opening I'm going to have to do when I'm sitting at the sewing machine, and I need to get kind of up close and personal with the machine. You know how when you work on some things, you really need to bend down and get close to what you're doing, and I can't do that when I'm working around a tripod. So I'm going to go ahead and do my top stitch. I'm going to use the foot without a guide. I'm going to stitch as close to the edge as I can, probably about 1/8 of an inch. Simple straight stitch all the way around, and then make sure you close your opening. My top stitching is all done. Let's go all the way around and have a close-up of the top stitching. It's a simple straight stitch. The beige actually blends in really nicely with this fabric. So the point of the top stitch is to make sure everything is held in place. I could have done a little better here pulling this down, but now that it's stitched, I can take it to the iron and press it. It's going to be much easier, and make sure to kind of pull the fabric like that as I'm pressing and tucking the canvas under. I am going to give this a quick press. While the iron is heating up and before we attach our straps, I'm going to show you what the Velcro and cardboard are for. This is optional. This is something I like to do for my bags. I especially like to do this for flat bottom bags because as it is right now, if you put something in, this bottom is not going to stay flat. It's not a solid surface. Turn your bag over. Ideally, this should look more like a rectangle, but it doesn't. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and just sort of press that with my hands, and you can go do this on your iron. I want to measure the bottom of my bag. It's just over 1 3/4, so I'm going to use 1 3/4 inch wide for my measurement. That'll work really well. So we've got 1 3/4 inch. Let's measure and see how long it is. I'm going to go from crooked corner 1 to crooked corner 2. It's about 10 inches, but I've got a short corner, so let's go from short corner to short corner. 9.5. So we've got 1 3/4 by 9.5. Let's write that down. 1 3/4 by 9.5. I'm going to cut a piece of cardboard 1 3/4 by 9.5. Use my rotary cutter that I use to cut things that are sticky or paper and not fabric. Take your bag, take your cardboard, make sure it fits in the bottom of your bag. It does, it fits. Now, what I'm going to do with this is cover it up with some fabric, and actually this cardboard's a little flimsy. It's already got a bend in it. I'm going to use a little piece of plastic. I'm going to show you a couple options. These are called Color and Icon Cut and Slice Flexible Cutting Boards. These are a flexible plastic. I use these for quilting templates, and we also use them to feed our outdoor animals as feeding trays. This is what I'm going to use today. Other options for what I'm doing. If you have an AccuQuilt and you've got one of these cutting mats, and let's say it's seen better days, you can't use it anymore, you can use a strip of this. This is nice thick plastic. It is a little pliable, but it will add stability to the bottom of your bag. cutting mats like this. If you've got a really old cutting mat, don't just junk it. Keep it around for stuff like this to use as a base or reinforcements for things. But I'm going to go ahead and use one of these. There's 3 colors. I'm going to use the yellow. I don't think it will show through the canvas, but I'll go ahead and use the yellow. You want it the same size as your strip. Well, would you look at that? It's just about perfect. So I'm going to line that up, and I'm going to cut a strip off of this. I'm actually going to cut 2, and I'm going to reinforce my cardboard. So I'll have a piece of plastic on each side of my cardboard. This just helps make it a little bit sturdier. My lining is the canvas. I go like this. I'm going to make a little sleeve for it. I really don't measure these. I just sort of eyeball it. So it's inside. I'm going to cut this. That's a really big seam allowance. It's fine. I'm going to start with that. I'm going to clean up this edge, make it nice and straight, and I'm just going to sew along the long seam, and I'm just going to make a tube and make sure this fits inside the tube. The reason I'm doing this is because it's going to blend into our lining, and this will be removable. So if you need to wash your bag, you'll be able to take this out. You'll be able to take this out, and then you can wash your bag. I sewed a straight line down the side. All I want to do is make sure this is going to fit. And you can also use really thick plastic for this if you've got some acrylic sheeting lying around or something like that. Oh, that's perfect. So that fits. I could make it tighter if I wanted to. I don't need to. It's for the bottom of the bag. Now what I'm going to do is close off this end. So now I have a line of stitching here, and then I closed off the end at the bottom. I want to go ahead and turn it right side out. So if you were doing this with the pretty fabric, you know, as you're sewing right sides together, pretty standard when you sew things together. So flip it right side out. Okay, we're turned right side out. I'm going to put everything inside. Kind of easier to do one piece at a time. So we've got plastic, cardboard, plastic. There we go. This is going to be way too long, which is just fine. Here's a couple options. The easiest option is to cut it, and then I'll fold it over and sew it. That's what I'm going to do. I don't worry about it. You can leave it like this because we're going to put this in the bottom of the bag. I'll show you how to attach that. You can just leave that. If you wanted this really nice and neat, I would say before you sew up the side seam, you could have folded the ends under and finish that off. I'm not worried about it. Here's what I'm going to do, because again, this is going in the bottom of the bag. Let's at least cut it straight. I'm going to go ahead and sew that closed. This is sewed closed, and it's sewed long, which is fine, because if I ever need to open it again, I can just cut that off, pull out the inside. Like if it gets really bent, or maybe I want to put in 2 pieces of cardboard, make it extra thick, I still have room. Let's go to the next step. Sticky back Velcro. Here's what we're going to do. This is going to make some noise. I've used quite a bit of this already. I want a piece that's just about as long as my base. So actually, if I cut it right on this line, that's about fine. And again, the reason I do this is this makes it removable. On the base, I'm going to put the scratchy part, and the fuzzy part's going to stay inside the bag. This is some serious sticky back. Like really, it is super sticky back. You don't need to sew this down. It's very sticky. This is the scratchy part, the rough part. Just like that. Bag You want to center your lining. My lining is definitely bigger than the inside of my bag. I can see that. See how it's kind of wrinkly? I did go in and iron it, but it's okay. Just get it as centered as possible and get a smooth on the bottom. This is the fuzzy part, the soft part. I'm going to go in and peel this off. Super sticky. This is about the center. I'm aiming for the center of the inside of my bag on the bottom. Let's stick that in there. And just stick it to the inside of my bag. See it? Right there at the bottom? Base. Put this in. Theoretically it should fit. Oh yeah, it's perfect. Push that in. So now this isn't going to move. And this helps your bag stand up. And I've got a nice solid bottom. See? Now we have to put on the straps. They gave us 2 straps, and these are really nicely done. They've got the nice finished edges. These are going on the outside of the bag. It tells you to measure 2 inches in, and they have that measured from the outside of the strap. So this almost lines up with the inside, but not quite. When you look at this, it's not exactly the same on both sides. One side, you can see the texture a little better. I hope that's showing up on camera. You can feel it too. It feels more textured. And the other side is very smooth. So you have to decide if you want the texture to show or do you want the smooth to show. Here's the instructions. See the 2 inches in? And then they're having us sew it with this box stitch, which I've done before and doesn't always come out perfect. Unless you're really, really good at it, I'm going to recommend trying to find a thread that matches this as close as possible. I think I'm going to go smooth side out, and I think I'm going to line up this part with the edge of the yellow. It's going to be easier for me. What it doesn't tell you is how far down to go. I'm going to eyeball it. And as you're attaching, make sure you don't get a twist. That looks good. I'm going to put the clip there. You don't want to use pins because once you get a pin in it, you can't get the hole out. It'll poke a hole in your leather. Make sure it's straight all the way around. I don't have a twist. The bottom of this is lining up with the quilting, but I don't know if my quilting is necessarily straight. So measure that part. Oh, 1 inch. 1 inch. Just like that. This isn't my favorite way to attach handles. I like to work them in as I'm putting the lining on, which will be in that video that I'm including below showing you how to box corners, because it's how to make a bag out of charm squares. What I'm going to do is use this thread. Normally I don't put polyester on the regular sewing machine, but this is a closer match than the color that's on my machine. And I'm going to switch machines to do this. Let me show you why. This is the Juki I've been using. Even if I take this base extension off, this piece of the machine is very big. Here's a Juki QVP. This piece comes off like that. This actually would have been easier to do the top stitch on because you can slide a bag over the machine bed right here. I want to be able to slide this over the machine. That's going to be easier for me to work with. Now I know I do have to move it around to make the X. I'm going to go where the top stitching is. So my needle is probably about 1/4 inch from the end. I'm going to go ahead and start there. I'm going to adjust the speed. It's off camera. There's a little turtle and a bunny. We're going to turtle. I don't want to accidentally floor it and have it go too fast. I'm using my top stitch as my guide. Do you see this? It's crooked, the stitches aren't right. I don't like this at all. I'm going to take this out. That's what happens when you sew on this. It's faux leather, the PVC product. I'm going to scratch it. See if any of the holes come out. I don't think it will. Nope. That's what happens when you seam on leather. What I'm going to try, oh, it's not bad on this side. Look at that. On the textured side, do you see that? You can barely see the holes. Guess which side is going to end up being out, the textured side, because now you can't see it. I was going to try putting a damp pressing cloth on it, but I think this will melt. This is PVC. Let's do it anyway. I'll just do it to see what happens. Worst comes to worst, I trim it. Here's the results. The holes are smaller. I put a damp pressing cloth over it and I moved the iron quickly so I didn't want to melt it. But it's also flatter than here. You might not be able to see it, but I can feel the difference in thickness. So I'll go ahead and put the textured side out because you can't see the holes at all. I've got it clipped back in place again. I'm not making a box stitch. When things aren't fun and it becomes too frustrating and you're not getting a good result, you don't always have to follow the instructions. So again, if you really want that box stitch, I'll see if I can find a good video and link it below for you. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start, let's see, I want to bring that down just a little bit. I want to make sure it's nice and secure and that I have enough room to run over it a few times. You could actually make it a feature if you like showing that much strap there. I don't want to show that much. I think that looks good. I'm lining up this with this, at least hopefully. I'm kind of right on top of the camera. I'm looking at my top stitch, trying to make sure this is straight. That looks straight. I'm going to pull the presser foot all the way up, and I'm going to start just outside my strap. Great, so my needle is down and it's touching before the strap. This machine has a tack down. If you don't have a tack down on your machine, you can just run your needle up and down a few times. Oh, I need to put my presser foot down. Presser foot down. I'm going to run the tack down stitch. And I'm going to go straight across the strap until I reach the other side. I'm using the top stitch as a guide. There we go, I'm on the other side. I'm going to tack it down. This should have tacked down on the other side, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and trim that. I'm going to trim this, and I'm going to do that a few times. What I'm going to do is line this up with the outside of my presser foot. I'm going to do the same thing. And let's go this way really quick. Let's see if it's easy enough to go this way. It is. What I'm going to do is there's a little space right here. I'm going to line that up. Just using my presser foot, kind of making random lines. I want to make sure it's straight and easy to line up and I don't have to measure anything. I'm hand cranking. I want to match. Perfect. There's the other thread. I'm going to run a couple lines down. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. If I line it up with this space, there's no little gap, but there's a line right here between the plastic and the metal. Here's another reason why I like to attach my straps inside the front and the lining. See that? If you had the box stitch, that would be a bit neater. But again, inside the bag, there's how it came out. That's fine by me. Wow, that is really secure. This is more secure than a box stitch. This isn't going anywhere. I need to make sure I bring that around, and I'm going to measure this and try to make this side look just like the other side, and then do the straps on the other side of the bag. I'll go ahead and do that off camera. I've got the straps on. They're nice and secure. The inside, kind of ugly. Let me show you what I'm going to do. I have this AccuQuilt die with the hearts. This heart is big enough to cover that on the inside. I have some Kimberbell double-sided Bond Pro. I put the double-sided Bond Pro on some scrap canvas. You just iron it down, run them through the AccuQuilt. 4 little hearts. I'm going to peel the backing off. I'm going to cover it. I'm going to iron those on and show you what it looks like. Let me know if you're interested in seeing how to use the double-sided Bond Pro if you want me to make a video about patches. There's my heart ironed on. I don't even know if you can see it. It's right here. Blends right in. Probably would have been more fun if I would have made it a different color, but I wanted to try and blend it with the lining. If you do something like this, make sure you cover the strap. You don't want to melt your strap. Let's get a look at our bag. So here's the inside. My lining turned out to be a little bit larger than the bag, but that's okay. That's the lining. It doesn't have to be perfect. We made the little base. It's easier to put things in here, and it provides a little support for the bottom. Here's what I did with the straps. I will tell you, I put this over my shoulder. I'm 5'9". I could have used more strapping. Even if I had this closer to the top and I did the box, it wouldn't have been quite enough. Here's one side. Here's the other. Everything came out just fine. Let's look at the bottom. Perfectly imperfect. Little oopsie there. That's okay. That's where I had to fix that hole. And then I just have the straight lines instead of the quilting. I actually really like the way that looks. That was a good oopsie. Imperfectly imperfect corner again. Doesn't matter. Remember, this is a bag. It's going to sit on the bottom. You can see the blue, so it looks nice. I did okay tucking around with my top stitch. Pretty good there. Handles ended up textured side out. I didn't twist. That's a big thumbs up. It came out pretty good overall. Let me know if you make the bag, if you have any issues, if you've got a good resource for this. Again, I'll look for a nice box stitch video and see if I can link that below. I hope you enjoyed making this with me today. Please like, subscribe, share, leave me feedback, leave me comments. Let me know if you want me to make a video about patches. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you next time.